I'm Emily Mashak, and you're listening to Tuned In to NoCo, Town Square Media's show that lets you know what matters in NoCo. I'm talking today with Marietta Rodriguez, the CEO of NeighborWorks America, about the results of a recent NeighborWorks survey. So thank you so much for joining me, Marietta.
Thank you, Emily.
Before we get into the topic at hand, though, would you be able to tell me a little bit about NeighborWorks and its role in our communities?
Sure, I'd be happy to. NeighborWorks America is a national nonprofit that was created by Congress in the late 1970s. We were created then to really help fight disinvestment in urban neighborhoods, and we did that primarily through supporting local nonprofits through investment into their communities. We are now supporting more than 245 locally based organizations across the country. They make up the NeighborWorks network. They all focus on housing and community development issues, creating opportunities for people to pursue homeownership, creating affordable rental properties, providing financial capability and housing counseling services, a variety of programs. In addition, NeighborWorks is one of the largest trainers in the community development field. We do this primarily through in-person training events as well as virtual training events for nonprofits, government agencies, and other partners working in the community. So we do a variety of things, but our primary focus is around housing on the affordable side and building communities, ensuring all residents have equal voice as to what happens in their community every day.
Right. And speaking of housing and housing affordability, you conduct a survey every year that looks into this. You just released the findings of your latest survey, and it found that 30% of Americans have experienced financial setbacks because of COVID-19. From the results of the survey, how do you think the pandemic is really affecting homeownership?
Well, we also learned that 1 in 3 Americans are looking for a new home. And that's a very different story than last year at this time when we did the survey. We found people were staying in place. There wasn't a lot of movement. If there was, they were moving in with family members. I think what the pandemic has highlighted is something that we've known for a long time, that the home where you live is the hub of your life. And that's more true today than ever. As people are working from home in greater numbers, they're educating their children from home, they're accessing other services such as telehealth via home. And so I think people were seeing greater interest in home ownership and movement in the market because people are really taking stock. Like, what is it I need in my home? Am I adequately housed today based on my new needs? And so we're seeing a lot of movement. There's a lot of interest. And as a result, home prices have gone up primarily because there is just a general lack of inventory. There was a lack of inventory pre-pandemic, and the pandemic has just exacerbated that problem. The interesting thing in the survey, however, is that 89% of people agree that owning a home would give them a greater feeling of safety and security. And 8 out of 10 people believe that homeownership gives them a connection to their community, which is interesting because we've been at home for over a year. People are really craving connection. So we found that insight very interesting and probably driving this interest in homeownership.
That is really interesting. I would not have thought that the pandemic would actually spur that interest, but it totally does make sense. What other financial hardships do you see that Americans are facing right now based on the survey, maybe related to COVID-19 or maybe not?
I think that people are definitely financially challenged. The interesting insight here is that 73% of people who have been financially challenged because of the pandemic say it's going to take them 6 months or more to recover. And 46%, almost half, say it may take a year or more. And so that's really interesting, especially when you think about the resources through stimulus, through enhanced unemployment, through the American Rescue Plan, that are being pushed out, that people are still feeling a great deal of financial distress. Obviously, when people are feeling financially stressed, they've probably taken some hit on their credit. So I think credit is an obstacle. It's presenting as a challenge for households. The survey reported that 3 in 10 people have had financial applications denied due to their credit score. And that's important to note, because not only do you need decent credit to buy a home, but you need decent credit to rent a home. And sometimes even to get a job, they'll run your credit report. So I think paying attention to where your credit score is and understanding your credit is really important. And there are HUD-approved housing counseling agencies, many in the NeighborWorks network, that can help consumers understand their credit, understand if there are mistakes on their credit, how to repair their credit. I think all of that is really important as we look towards economic recovery post-pandemic.
Right. And speaking of these obstacles, the survey also found that Black adults are facing more obstacles than the rest of the population. Why do you think this is happening?
Well, we've seen communities of color in other they feel communities of color are some of the most vulnerable in this country. And when there are economic distressors, those communities feel it more acutely. We saw that during the 2008 foreclosure crisis. We're seeing it here as well in the current pandemic crisis. I think they are hardest hit when it comes to credit concerns. We're seeing that through this survey. 63% of Black adults don't think they would be approved for homeownership. They wouldn't be approved for that mortgage loan, which is problematic because we're seeing the rate of Black homeownership be the lowest in this country's history, dating back to the 1960s when the fair housing laws were enacted and passed. So I think it's an important thing that we pay attention to. I think we're seeing the racial wealth gap widen between Black and white Americans. That does not make for a healthy economy or a healthy community. So it's something that we have to pay attention to, and we have to put some resources to narrowing that gap.
Right. What would those resources be to narrow that gap? Do you have a general idea, or is it still something we're figuring out?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of room for innovation here, but some of the things that we work on through our local organizations is providing resources such as down payment assistance, closing cost assistance to help people break into becoming a first-time home buyer, making affordable mortgage products available. A lot of people don't think about mortgages as products, but they are products, just like types of shampoo or toothpaste. Not all of them are right for you. You need to find the mortgage product that's right for you. Our organizations also provide a great deal of financial education, financial capability. We have several organizations that are helping people build their savings through programs like a matched savings program. We have organizations working through large employers in communities where the employer is also matching a savings if the employee takes certain financial capability classes. So I think there are ways in which we can work with large employers, work with the community, work with municipal governments to break down some of these barriers so that opportunities for more Americans who are interested in homeownership can pursue it.
Right. And you've touched on some of this already, but I'm sure a lot of our listeners out there are hearing this and relating to it. They want to buy a home, but they've faced financial struggles. What would your advice for them be?
Great question. I think if anyone is interested in buying a home, whether today or 2 years from now, the first step should be sitting down with a HUD-approved housing counseling agency, have them together with you develop a homebuyer plan that is tailored to you. You can understand what your affordability is, how much you can borrow. You can understand what's going on in the market, and you'll learn if there are programs and services that can help you, like down payment assistance. How much do you need to have saved? What are those steps before you get online and start looking at Zillow or Redfin and looking at properties? Find out how much you can borrow and when would be the best time. Right now is very tough. I will admit there's not a lot of inventory, particularly on the affordable side. But again, working with the Housing Counseling Agency can help you time that purchase so that it is the best time for you. And we have several in the Denver market you can work with that are NeighborWorks organizations. Rocky Mountain Communities, CRHDC works in the Denver market. You can find them through our website, which is www.neighborworks.org, and there's a state, city, zip lookup.
Well, that is great. And thank you again so much, Marietta, for taking the time to talk to me today. Is there anything else that you would like listeners to know?
One other thing that I would mention is anytime there's a crisis, there is always a criminal element that's looking to prey on those that are most vulnerable. And we're seeing that in the pandemic. There's been a huge insurgence of scam activity, both related to stimulus and vaccines, but also we're starting to see more home scams related to evictions or forbearance scams. So we do have a resource that can help people. It's a website, stophomescams.org. It lists some of the most common scams. It will also give you avenues to report scam activity.
Well, thank you so much, Marietta. Again, I know this information will be valuable to our listeners, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Emily. Appreciate it.
Again, that was Marietta Rodriguez talking about the results of the latest NeighborWorks America survey. Learn more about the survey at neighborworks.org.